right, we're going to go ahead and get started with our next lesson having to do with animal adaptations. Before you get started, just make sure that you either have the notes that I sent and they're printed off with a pen or a pencil ready to go, or you have a notebook paper with something to write with as well. We'll do it the same way we did last time. If you're going to do the handwritten version, just don't write anything until you see the picture. If you're doing the handwritten version, here's where you're going to do that. Just set your paper up the same way we had last time with your name up here at the top, the title for today, which is Animal Adaptations, your line separating subject on the left and details on the right, and then notes number 6 in the corner. I do have the notes number correct this time, so number 6 is correct. Once you have that set up, you can move on to the next slide. Okay, what is an adaptation? This is going to be our big term for today. We mentioned this in the vocab, but our definition for adaptation is this: any characteristic that helps an organism, whether plant or animal, survive in its environment. Okay, we talked about the different types of environments that an organism can live in. The desert ecosystem, Arctic tundra, warm tropical seas, all those different biomes that we mentioned. And each of those environments are so different that animals that live in those environments have special characteristics that help them survive. Adaptations are usually inherited from their parents. It's part of their DNA, not something they have to learn how to do. And these enable the organisms to live and survive in their ecosystems. I know we mentioned before about the camel with their big hump on the back here. Here's my version of a camel. But yikes. Anyways, the camel, this big hump on the back, we mentioned that was an adaptation where the camels store fat in their humps so that when they're caught in the desert in an area with no nutrients or water nearby, they can kind of pull from those reserves in order to still be able to survive. That's one example. And we also mentioned the long eyelashes on the camels. They have really long eyelashes. And the purpose for that is to help the camels be able to keep dust and sand from blowing into their eyes. Those long eyelashes work as sort of like a filter, in the same way that our eyelashes work. They're just much, much longer because of the really sandy, windy environment that they live in. So the first type of adaptation that we're going to look at is attention generating displays. Okay, this is obviously some kind of characteristic of an animal that will help them be able to earn attention of some sort for some reason. Okay, so just kind of to kind of gather the attention of the other animals. First example of that is bright colors, whether that be to kind of say, ooh, hey, look at me, or maybe even scare predators away sometimes. Sometimes snakes will have bright colors. Tropical fish will have bright colors, not because they're just trying to be pretty, but because those bright colors are usually a signal to predators that, hey, I am dangerous, I am toxic, leave me alone. That would be the purpose for that there. And then sometimes even just distinctive patterns, okay? Sometimes patterns that are meant to look like something else, sometimes patterns that they have on their fur or on their skin to help them be able to blend in. Both of those are two types of adaptations. We'll look a little more specifically at those in just a second. But the purpose of getting the attention of other animals, there's two purposes for it. Number one, to attract another organism for reproduction. Okay, to kind of say, hey, come this way, come look at me in order to reproduce. One very interesting way that happens is in flowers. Okay, the reason why flower petals are the certain color that they are is those bright colors attract insects to kind of come and play around in them. Well, when the insects come and play around in the flowers, they actually are transferring the pollen to the part of the flower that it has to have in order to be able to reproduce. So it's not like the bee is the only one benefiting here from getting the nectar from the flower. The flower is benefiting as well. So it has those bright colors in order to attract the bee and other insects to it so that it will help with that pollination and reproduction. Another thing that attention generating displays can do, it can warn another organism to stay clear, okay? Poison dart frog, which is what you're seeing here on the left, that's another example of that. There are tons of different species of poison dart frogs, but the bright colors on their skin, on their scales here, kind of helps them scare other predators away. Those bright colors when a bird is swooping down to maybe attack or eat the poison dart frog, the bright colors will convey the message to the bird, hey, stand back, leave me alone. The same way that we would stay away from a neon yellow caution sign or a bright red stop sign. Those kind of brighter colors cause us to kind of pause and think twice because they catch our attention. Okay, think like caution tape and things. Those are not just regular colors. They're usually brighter colors to attract our attention. Okay, some other examples, peacocks are a really good example. Here we see the peacock spreading and fanning its feathers, this one here, in order to not just to show off, but to show off for a purpose and trying to attract the attention of this other peacock here, okay, to attract it for mating purposes so that they can have baby peacocks. Butterflies also have attention generating displays. They have bright colors and distinctive patterns. We talked about flowers. There are some snakes that have bright colors and distinctive patterns. Parrots, especially, lots of different tropical birds, and then also tropical fish. Okay, what you're seeing here, obviously, the bright colors of this tropical fish here, and then the parrot here. Both of those are to help scare predators away and see those bright colors like a caution sign and say, oh, okay, maybe think twice. Maybe this is not where I'm supposed to be. Oftentimes it's a trick. Those bright colors are in an attempt to warn away predators. Sometimes not so much. In the case of the poison dart frog, obviously their warning of, hey, I am toxic, I am poisonous. That is true. In the case of the parrot, don't necessarily think he's toxic or poisonous. But it still serves the same purpose in keeping away predators. So at this point in your notes, if you're handwriting, go ahead and pause the video to copy these down. And we'll move on. So our next example of adaptations is mimicry. Okay, we've mentioned this a little bit before. We're going to go into it a little bit more. When an organism resembles another organism or its surroundings to increase the chances of survival is called mimicry. Okay, again, as I said before in class, before spring break, this is when an organism doesn't necessarily mind if it's seen because it will look like something else. Okay, it's not trying to blend in, that would be camouflage. But with mimicry, you have an organism that tries to act like another organism in order to either scare away a predator or maybe just make it think that it's something else that it's really not. Okay, this is when one animal looks, sounds, or acts like another animal to fool predators into thinking it is poisonous or dangerous. Okay, one of the best examples I have of that is the viceroy butterfly. Okay, the viceroy butterfly looks a lot like the monarch butterfly. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and advance to the next slide because it actually does a really good job showing you these. But if you need to pause for the purpose of the notes, go ahead and do that. I'm going to go on to the next slide for teaching purposes. But okay, here we have the monarch on the left and the viceroy on the right. Okay, the viceroy is actually a sweet tasting butterfly or insect to birds. Okay, so birds really love to eat the viceroy. It's like a treat to them. However, the monarch is not. The monarch is actually very bitter and sour to birds. It's not very tasty. So the viceroy, in an attempt to protect itself, it looks a lot like the monarch because when the bird will see it, it will think, oh, that's a monarch. I don't want to eat that. Those things taste nasty. Okay. It would be like us if we made a whole, bunch of brownies and we disguised them to look like broccoli, okay? Chances are they're not going to get eaten nearly as fast if they're broccoli because broccoli doesn't taste nearly as good as brownies. So that kind of helps protect the brownies. In the same way, the viceroy tries to look like the monarch so that other birds will leave it alone. The only way you can really tell is the viceroy has this black bar across the bottom wings here. Okay, that to the trained eye, to someone who knows what they're looking for, that will tell you whether or not the butterfly is a viceroy or a monarch. If there's no bar running across all of the bottom wing here, it's a monarch. If there is the bar, that's the viceroy. Okay, but that's a great example of mimicry that helps this viceroy to be able to survive. Otherwise, it would get eaten up real fast. The other example here is camouflage. Okay, and this is different than mimicry because it's not that it's trying to act or sound or look like something else. It doesn't want to be seen. It wants to blend in with this environment. This is another kind of interaction that helps an organism survive because obviously they're probably not going to be attacked if they're not able to be seen. This is also beneficial for hunting purposes when lions or tigers or other um, predatory type animals are trying to hunt down their prey. If they're seen, they're obviously never going to catch anything. Okay, if they're bad at being invisible, they will scare away their prey before they ever get to it. Chameleons are a good example of camouflage. They have the awesome ability to, or the awesome adaptation, I should say, to blend in with whatever environment they are around. A walking stick bug is another example. This is a bug that looks almost exactly like a stick, unless you know what you're looking for, or unless you get pretty lucky and you actually see that it's a bug. This website down here will look at some pictures probably maybe not tomorrow, but in the coming days. I want to show those to you, but I can't really show them to you right now while recording this slideshow. So, but there's some really cool examples of camouflage that hopefully we'll get to. At this point in the notes, we have now added from mimicry and camouflage all the way down to definitions for mimicry and camouflage. Okay, if you need to go ahead and pause the video to catch up, that's fine. Notice at the top of the page, I had to go on to another page, so I put page 2 at the top. I personally chose to not write on the back of the page. I went to a whole new page, just because that helps me stay neat, and I had enough paper to do that. But then you're going to go ahead and make the divider line here, and we're going to go to our next topic, talking about bird beaks. Okay, there are two very easy to spot adaptations for birds, and those are beaks and feet. Okay, first we're talking about beaks, and then we'll get to feet in just a minute. The most important function of a bird is eating. Okay, it's the most important job. The most important thing that it's made to do is to eat. Honestly, I kind of wish that was my most important function too, but it is not. If it were, we'd have a problem. But a bird's bill, or its beak or mouth, is shaped according to what it eats. Okay, obviously you can see here there are tons of different beak type shapes. Okay, which of these do you think would be best suited for kind of drilling holes into a tree? Like if it were just a peck, 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 make the best, be the best kind of type for kind of digging holes into a tree. You might think this one, letter B, but this one's a little bit too thin. If this were to kind of peck against a tree, it may get bent or broken or snagged, something like that. The best option for drilling holes into a tree is actually letter D. This one here. This is what we call a chiseled beak. Okay, this is one that obviously you can tell has a super sharp point. Looks like it's very thick at the base. It could do some pretty good drilling. Okay, so and that's true. This type of beak in letter D is more like what we would see on a woodpecker because they are adapted to be able to kind of peck at the wood, like I said, and dig the insects out from inside. Okay, let's see. Which of these do you think is maybe best suited for um, a predatory bird, one who needs to kind of rip or tear flesh of some sort. Okay, there are a lot of examples here for that one. Letter E would be good. Obviously, this sharp point lends itself to being a pretty good tearer of flesh. I could do that. F is a little thin, maybe not quite so much, but has that same kind of shape. C, maybe. G looks a little tough, maybe not. A looks a little tough, maybe not. Really, these four, I would say, are the best shaped for that. But obviously, as another example, just a curved, kind of sharp beak with a point at the end that would allow it to kind of rip into or tear flesh if that's what it needs to eat. A couple other examples. A pelican. Okay, a pelican's beak, that's this bird right here. This kind of beak is adapted to scoop up fish in order to eat it. When a pelican scoops up fish, it kind of almost like a net. It scoops up fish and water together. So it has this big kind of pouch hanging off the bottom. Okay, that would not work for drilling into a tree or tearing flesh, but it does work very well for kind of scooping fish up out of the water. The woodpecker's chiseled beak, like I mentioned earlier, that's the bird here on the right, allows it to drill holes into the wood and to get to the insects inside. Inside of the wood, obviously, the ants and other insects that are crawling around in there. But what would not work is if the woodpecker tried to use its beak to scoop up fish in water. It's not big enough, doesn't have that kind of pouch structure to be able to scoop everything up together. So this beak, the woodpecker's beak, is not adapted to be able to eat the same thing that the fish eats, or the pelican eats, which is a good thing because it lives on insects, not on fish. Okay? In the same way, the pelican's beak is not adapted to drill holes, like we said earlier, okay? His beak is adapted to scoop up the fish, which is what it eats, which works pretty well anyway. Another example, a hummingbird. Okay, a hummingbird doesn't drill into a tree for insects, doesn't scoop up fish. It actually has a long, very thin beak that works kind of like a drinking straw, allows it to get into the nectar inside of the flowers to kind of slurp and drink that up. The hummingbirds live off of nectar, and this really long beak here allows it to reach all the way to the inside of the flower. The nectar is located towards the base of the flower, not the top part where the petals are, but the very back, kind of the center part. And in order for it to get all the way there, it needs that super long and skinny kind of straw-like beak in order to get to it to suck it up. Okay, that's the hummingbird's beak adaptation. Now, a toucan, on the other hand, a toucan has a beak that allows it to grab and crush fruits and nuts. Notice this super big, thick, strong looking beak here. Their beak is as strong as a nutcracker. Okay, obviously the toucan's beak would not work to slurp up nectar, and the hummingbird's beak would certainly not work to crush fruit and nuts. Okay, so each of these beak adaptations are specifically designed for that kind of bird, according to what it eats. And the last example is the eagles and vultures. Okay, like I mentioned before in the previous slide, their beak shape is strong and hard and curved with a very pointy tip here on the end in order to rip and tear into flesh because these are carnivorous birds or birds that would eat meat, very predatory. Once they catch them, they need to be able to tear into it to get to the meaty part of their food there. Okay, if you're taking the handwritten notes, here's how I want you to structure the bird beak notes, all the way from the title bird beaks and down to eagles and vultures. Again, you can see I went on to a new page, so I just wrote page 3. That way I know that I have these in order when I'm done. Go ahead and pause the video now if you need to copy those down. Okay, once you've written the notes, I do want you to go back and try to draw the beak shapes. Obviously, you don't have to be, Da Vinci or anything, but Here's the pelican beak. I really exaggerated that pouch structure there for it to scoop up fish. Here's my woodpecker beak drilling holes into the tree. The hummingbird up here with the long beak. The toucan looking a little funky, but big, thick, strong, strong as a nutcracker. And then the eagle, who looks obviously, I don't know what he looks like, but with the sharp point here at the end to tear the flesh. Okay. All right, the next adaptation that we want to talk about with birds is their feet. Okay, birds' feet are adapted, meaning they're have unique characteristics to feet to fit the environment in which they live. Okay, which of these, let's say, do you think would be best for kind of perching? Perching on top of a fence or on top of a wire, maybe a telephone wire, something like that. Okay, probably the foot of the crow. Yes? Okay, with the long toes that enable it to kind of grasp onto something. Parrot might also do a good job with that. Okay. Which of these do you think would be best for swimming? Okay, if you know your birds at all, you're probably going to pick the mallard. That's a type of duck. Okay, the webbed feet here with the little kind of skin attachment between each toe gives them almost like a flipper type shape for a foot, which allows them to be able to paddle through the water a lot more easily. Okay, and each of these different types of feet that you see in the picture there have some specific job. I just picked two that would be hopefully a little bit more obvious to you. But we're going to talk about 5 different types of adaptations in bird feet. Okay. First example, vultures and eagles, along with their sharp beaks for tearing flesh, they also have strong, sharp claws to firmly hold their prey while flying. Okay. Um, oh, I used to have a really great like fact or statistic. I can't remember what it is, but the amount of pressure that like pounds per square inch of pressure that an eagle can kind of put onto their victim as they like go to grab it and pick it up, they can grab, I think it's like, I want to say like 80 times stronger than a human hand, or 18 or 8, somewhere around there, but much, much stronger than a human hand. But they have those strong, sharp claws with kind of daggers almost in them so that they can pick up their prey and easily hold on to them while they're flying. Sparrows and perching types of birds. Okay, you can see if you kind of get real close and look at the toes of this bird's foot here. These long toes allow them to perch on top of a branch or a wire, so well that they're actually able to even sleep while perching up there. That would be the very special structure for that type of foot. Okay, going on to the next one. Cranes. Okay, these are birds that you can see commonly in Florida or beachy, kind of more wet places. But cranes have very long legs. Okay, you can see here that this extends probably somewhere down into the water, maybe even to here. Okay, here's the other leg that kind of bends out this way. But these super long legs are for walking through shallow water or mud. That way they don't get their feathers wet or dirty. And they also have spread out toes so that when they walk in the mud and the soft ground, they don't sink deep down. And then ducks, as I just mentioned, have those webbed feet to help them swim. This is like kind of like why sometimes people wear flippers when they go swimming, because it kind of helps them to push the water a little better. That's specifically designed for ducks because they don't need to grasp onto prey while they're flying. They don't need to perch on top of a wire, but they do spend quite a bit of time swimming. So their feet are especially shaped for that. And then lastly, hens or chickens. Hens have pretty cool looking feet. they have 3 toes in the front, 1, 2, 3, and then they have 1 toe that reaches out here in the back for both feet there. And that is so that they can kind of scratch and claw at the ground while looking for insects. That back toe kind of helps them be able to do that. Okay, not put there for perching or grasping prey, doesn't help them swim, but it does help them be able to kind of scratch the ground looking for insects, which is what they eat. So if you're doing the handwritten notes, this is where we left off with the weirdo looking eagle up here, poor guy. But here's where we left off. Here's the divider line for the bird feet, and then the different types of bird notes. And then again, had to go to a new page, so I put page 4 at the top. But go ahead and pause the video if you need to copy that down. Otherwise, go ahead and keep on rolling. And lastly, we're going to talk about a few adaptations for hooved animals. Okay, cloven hooves, like we mentioned in the notes, are those that are split into 2 toes. If you could see a little bit more closely there, you could see 1 toe here and 1 toe here. But these cloven hooves are good for 2 reasons. They help them keep their balance on uneven ground such as rocky hillsides, which is good because oftentimes sheep and goats are living in an area with very uneven surfaces, and if they can't catch their balance, they'll tumble down. They also can help animals such as cows and pigs keep their hooves healthy and out of the mud because they can separate those toes and kind of clean them out without having to get somebody else to help them, which is a benefit that those animals with solid hooves or 1 hoof all the way across don't have. A couple examples of animals that have cloven hooves. We have deer, elk, moose, bighorn sheep, pronghorn, and bison. They're all examples of North American wild animals with cloven hooves. Domestic animals, which this word means more like normal or kind of housebroken animals that you see more on farms and things, with cloven hooves would be goats, sheep, cattle, and even pigs. Okay, I often think this is really cute. Looks like they're wearing high heels, but they're not. But even up here in the front, there's actually 2 toes. You can see a little bit of a divider line there. And then solid hooves. Solid hooves have no toes. It's just 1 solid chunk all the way across. And these are built for speed and crossing of wide open spaces. This 1 flat solid surface works almost like a runner's block for a track star or something like that, or a track runner. It helps them to push off, like a push-off block. Okay. And these kinds of hooves you can find on horses, mules, donkeys. These kinds of hooves, however, they cannot clean themselves. If something gets stuck in there, typically their owner or something else will have to help them get it out. Can be pretty dangerous, but it's just one downside to having the hooves. But they are much more able to run and run quickly in wide open spaces. However, I will say that donkeys, horses, mules are not as comfortable walking on kind of uneven surfaces or rocky hillsides because they can slip and fall down pretty easily. Often why people don't want to take horses on kind of rocky terrain. Again, if you're doing the handwritten notes, here's our last section, adaptations and hoofed animals, the divider line, and then I think I spelled hoofed wrong. I think it's supposed to be Hooved, but either way, no one's grading you on your spelling. Anyways, here's the notes. Here's what you're writing for that last section there. Okay? And I believe that's all I have. Just make sure you keep these notes somewhere safe in your binder. We do have, I think, 1 more lesson coming up before we get to the study guide for the test. So just be on the lookout for how we're going to do that. Let me just click this and make sure. Yeah, we're not in the summary. So you're good to go.